Greetings, folks. Once again, it's Richard from Chaos Collectibles. Wanted to apologize. We're reaching you a day late. Been dealing with some health issues, so I wanted to get something out here today. Today, we're going to discuss comic books and what actually got me into collecting comic books and really reading them on a regular basis when I was a kid. And kind of the things that I've read throughout the years and what I really enjoy nowadays. So primarily when I was a kid, I would read comic books here and there. I was always a huge Batman fan. Growing up in the '70s, I was really into the Adam West Batman show. Like I was a huge Batman freak when I was a kid. I had one of those. I don't know. Some of the younger people may not remember what they are. I don't know if they still make them nowadays, because now you have the electric driving cars that you can get for kids. But when I was a kid, they had what you would call it's like a pedal car. So it's like a little car you would push, similar to like the big wheels and stuff like that. Except you would push it, and it would have like the shell of a car on. It was fiberglass, I believe, on the outside, and they had like Dukes of Hazzard cars, police cars, stuff like that. And I had a Batmobile. My parents got it for me when I was probably 3 or 4 years old, maybe. Um, and there's pictures of it that my parents absolutely loved. That when I got it for Christmas one year, and for the first probably 4 days, maybe 3 or 4 days that I owned it, I would sleep in it. Like it was, I would run around the house pretending to be Batman. Back then, you didn't get the costumes like you do nowadays, where you have these little cosplay sets and these little dress up kits that kids could get now. So we got those little Halloween costumes that was just like a mask held together in the back. It's a half mask held together in the back with a rubber band. Had a little slit where the mouth is that would always inevitably cut your lip or something, because it was just a little slice, like the width of maybe a nickel. And then it had like a parka, and it just said like it would say Star Wars and have some print, but it didn't have like any more look of the costume. Later on, they did evolve where they did have more of a look for the costume, but it would just have like a logo. So like as I was younger, I was, like I said, I was always a huge Batman fan, and we got into with the Mego toys. There was a lot of superheroes. So back then you were getting Spider-Man, the Hulk, and all that, and there was the Incredible Hulk TV show, which I absolutely loved when I was a kid. You would get those Spider-Man TV movies every now and then that now when you look at them, they're cheesy, but back then they were revolutionary. It was something. It was amazing. Anything with superheroes, even we had the stop motion cartoons. I mean, we did have regular cartoons too, but we had superhero cartoons they were these stop motions. It was frame by frame with like you had Thor and Captain America. I think they had the Incredible Hulk. Just some like really uh, basic, not even, like I said, not even animation. Everything was done in a stop motion style. So, growing up, I was always really into stuff like that. And then as I got a little bit older, you started getting more of the cartoons. You started getting things like Super Friends, Superpowers, Batman. So, you started getting all kinds of cartoons like later on in the years. And then when I really discovered comic books, it was probably around junior high. And I would be walking home from school, and there was a comic book store on my way to school, home from school. And this was, I don't know, probably, I would say maybe seventh grade. So, and that was, this is back when comic books were still a quarter. So that's when I was introduced to the X-Men and just everything, all kinds of properties that I never knew existed before then. Um, so I would start just kind of randomly, just it was crazy. It was just at a whim that we went into this comic book store walking home from school. Back then kids used to walk the streets or skateboard or ride a bike back and forth to school. We lived. I mean, it wasn't a far, like super far. It was a good mile, but it was a different world. So a lot of us did walk. I mean, a lot of us were latchkey kids at the time. Um, both parents would work. I would walk home from school with my friends, come home. We didn't have video games back then. Like a little bit later, we'd get the Nintendo. We didn't even have cable when I was, in the early junior high years. I mean, cable was around, but we didn't have it in my area because of where I live. Um, the the cables weren't. We didn't have the equipment, I guess, whatever. They ended up having to trench and to put in our cable, which happened probably when I was in eighth grade or something. So anyway, um, so what I would do is I would end up reading comic books most of the time. I would come home. There was still back then there were still cartoons on when you got home from school. So you'd watch the normal cartoons when you first get home from school. Back then it was like you're talking He-Man. I think Master Universe was on. Maybe GI Joe. No, I don't think GI Joe was still. Maybe I can't recall. GI Joe maybe a little bit earlier. That was probably about sixth grade. It's a little fuzzy. I mean, it's been years. So I mean, you figure I graduated high school in '91. So um, anyway, to kill the time when I wasn't out playing with my friends or doing it because we all had chores when we would get home and homework. I would read comic books, and I discovered, like I said, I discovered the X-Men. Um, I discovered Thor, Captain America, some of my favorite heroes that I still to this day read. What started me continually buying comics or buying comics on a weekly basis was I got really caught up in which I kind of randomly buy. I would randomly buy comics at the time. Not basically just because of certain series or heroes that I followed. It would be if the cover art really caught me. Same way I used to buy CDs back in the day, or hell, back then it was tapes. Um, and I got really captured by a an issue of the Flash, and it was issue 323, and it was the trial of the Flash, and it's basically the story of um, Barry Allen accidentally killing the Reverse Flash, and going on trial for it. And I believe it's 3 or 4 issues long, and it's actually what ended up leading to the end of Barry Allen. Well, the end comes in, not like it's a huge spoiler alert if you've never read comics from the 80s, led into the, was it Crisis on Infinite Earths, where Barry Allen dies. But it was something that really, that storyline really intrigued me, and I got really into not just linear comics or the continuing story. In some cases, with like the Uncanny X-Men and Thor, I was really into like linear timelines and just pretty much reading everything that came out. But that led way into trying to find something in stories that really that I enjoyed. I was always and still am a fan of the original. This is a collection of the original Marvel GI Joe comics, which I'm really into the graphic novels and omnibus now. Even though I own probably 10 to 15,000 individual comics, they take up so much room. It's ridiculous. I like reading them digitally. I like omnibuses and graphic novels nowadays, and I like it because what I really got into is this was leading into the '90s when you had that era of when you had the Chris Claremont era, and you know, you had Image Comics coming out, and you had a bunch of different things going that had you had all these crossovers, and I really love crossover storylines as long as they don't get too extravagant. For as great or as awesome as The Blackest Night is, um, and Brightest Day is, and like Civil War, they're awesome, but they are so massive. It's hard to keep up with everything like that. The like Crisis on Infinite Earths or Identity Crisis that DC put out. I'm a huge fan, and I still to this day, at least once a year, I read things like I'll read the Mutant Massacre that took place in the X titles. I read the Brood series that happened in Marvel. The where was there another one? Inferno series. Like there's a bunch of series like that happened in the '90s that I to this day I still I still enjoy reading. I'm also a big fan of the anti-heroes. I'm a huge fan of people like Grifter and the Punisher and Judge Dredd. Well, Judge Dredd, you can't really call him an anti-hero. He is the law. Lobo. Um, so I'm a big fan of just how diverse and massive the comic book world is, or the comic book universe, I should say. And I've always been a big reader. When I was a kid, we used to we used to have required reading. So like when we take breaks from school, like holiday breaks, or even when school ended, they would have like summer reading, and it was you'd get like extra credit, stuff like that. That's how I found things like The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, uh, different stuff like that. That's how plus, when I was younger, like I said, we didn't have cable. Like cable didn't exist when I was really young. We obviously didn't have video games. We had the Atari 2600 and ColecoVision and television, stuff like that. But I mean, you were only allowed to play it so much. And back then, there was one TV in your home on average. So you would go to school, come home from school, do your homework, whatever, and you'd play until basically like because back then my sister was still alive, so my sister was my babysitter. Um, and then when my parents came home, we had one TV in the house, so pretty much at night we watched whatever my parents wanted to watch. And if you didn't want to do that, it's not like we had a computer or anything like that. When I was younger, I didn't even have a radio. I mean, I had a little radio that would get radio stations, but like a cassette player or anything like that, I didn't have anything like that until I was probably in, like I said, in junior high. So I would take my time and read. I would read whatever books I could get my hand on. I did a lot of reading when I was younger. A lot of people may not remember the encyclopedia. I would read the encyclopedia cover to cover. We had these books that were they called them kids classics, where you could read Tom Sawyer, and they were cut down versions of them. But you'd read King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, Black Beauty, Charlotte's Web, stuff like that. So I was always reading when I was younger. And then when I got into comic books, it was the same thing, because I would just, when I didn't, I've always been someone that, for the most part, even though I do enjoy TV and movies and stuff like that. I love movies. I'm a huge movie fan. I do love TV shows, but it takes a while for me to get into it. Like sometimes I can be into it and just really pay attention, but a lot of times, if the television it's background noise to me. Um, I'm always doing something else, some kind of other project. I always have other things to do. I'm working on stuff all the time. I'm working on, like I'm working on action figures right now. I'm working on customs. I do all, whatever I got going around, and so the TV's usually just background noise for me. So the same thing. Like I would read comics. Even to this day, I'll be reading comic books or actual novels on my tablet, and the TV's just playing in the background. But there were certain things that would just catch my attention. Certain comics that really, really, like I said, I would just really be into. And they're like to this day, there's still a lot of them that I mean, these came out in like 1989, 1990, 1991, and I still read to this day. Like at least once a year, I will read. I will go through and read, Iron Man's Armor Wars, or I just got finished reading the whole run of the Mutant Massacre, and you I will go logically or linearly with these storylines as they continue. Going into Inferno and just different things like that. I will read, the Planet Hulks, and there's a lot of those, and the crossover became more popular over the last, I'd say probably 5 years, to the point where you even get crossovers with other companies too. So that's kind of cool when you get that. You'll get I think there was some DC titles that crossed over with Marvel at one point. There's been different titles that do crossovers, and different mixtures of genres, and not just one Marvel property or one Image property or whatever jumping into another, but like full on crossovers. And those are always fun. Because you like to see different versions or different visions of characters that you love. And then, like right now, I tend to read more of the older titles, and I tend to read more independent comics than I do your mainstream titles. As far as anything that's mainstream that I've read in the last few years, that's newer, I read Ronin, which is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle one, which was probably 2 years ago. I think it was a year ago. There was a Batman, or the Deceased run from DC Comics. I read those. There was a title that came out, and there were these jumbo books that was Joker and Harley. I read those, but on a large scale, I don't read a lot of the mainstream titles that are coming out, just because nothing's really piqued my interest. Once, I'll poke around. Actually, I just ordered the new Transformers and G.I. Joes coming from Skybound. So I'm going to start reading those. I'm pretty excited to see how a new company has a different look of classic characters. I'm always curious of when that happens. From when G.I. Joe went from Marvel to, I think it went to Devil's Due and then IDW, if I recall correctly. But there was like different takes. Devil's Due had a very radical and different view of the G.I. Joe universe, as did IDW. But and I mean, anybody's interpretation is anybody's interpretation. I'll give anything a read once, and then if I don't enjoy it, I just won't continue reading it. I'll usually give something like 3 or 4 issues before I, say, hey, I'm done. I just can't do it, or if I'm going to continue reading it. There are certain characters that I always try to peek on, and I'll pick up one of their titles here and there, or I'll wait till a graphic novel comes out, and I'll check it out and see if the new storylines are worth it. Thor is a big one. I've always been a huge Thor fan. Captain America, I absolute love for Captain America. America is one of my favorite characters ever. I'm also a big Hulk fan. So any of those titles, I'll check out. Anything Batman, I absolutely love Batman. I love the Red Hood. I like the Flash. And when they started the rebirths, when they brought those characters back, and like started redoing the DC universe with the rebirths, I was into that. I wasn't really a big fan of the New 52 when they did that. So I'm always just kind of in and out with the comic books nowadays. I'm hoping for some serious storylines to get me really hooked, and maybe there are some stuff that's out there that I'm just not aware of. like I said, I'm more into the independent comics. That's the one thing is I jump on TikTok and I see all these publishers or all these independent artists and writers that have their books out there available on the TikTok shop. And once I reestablish myself financially, like the store is really running right and everything, and uh, I will definitely invest in some of these comics because I number one, I'm all about, like I've always said, we are a small business and we try to support other people's small businesses, especially when it comes anything with art or comics, even books. I've bought a few independent books out there too. I used to go through Comic Con, and we talked about this on the last episode with AJ. And that was one of my favorite things was to go and have someone sell me on their book at a comic book convention, like independent publishers. If you pull me inside and say, "Hey, how would you like to read a story about this?" and then you tell me what it is, I'm willing to give it a shot. I love reading. I love discovering new stuff. I love supporting local artists. I love supporting independent companies. We all need to support each other. It's fun. And there's some good stuff. There's a lot of undiscovered talent out there that really people are just missing out because they don't get the opportunity to see it. Um, I've used to, and I've done a few different titles through Kickstarter that independent comic book companies have put their own stuff out and published their own stuff. That's how I'm a huge fan of Brian Polito's and that whole universe. Well, it used to be Chaos Comics until he lost it, and now the bit that he brought back, I think it's called Coffin Comics. But I was always a big Lady Death fan. Lady Death, Purgatory. I'm a huge Evil Ernie fan. I absolutely love Evil Ernie. And I have pretty much every book they put out under Chaos Comics, and then the different let's call it versions that have come out since then. I have a lot of that stuff. So I've gotten even through Kickstarter some of their stuff, some of their exclusives that they've had, uh, and I become a fan of certain people. There was one called The Last Sheriff that I discovered off of TikTok that or no Kickstarter. I don't know how to talk, which was a very good series that I found. There was a bunch of companies, and some of them may not be around anymore, um, and some of them might. I mean, a lot of them are just, it's people getting their art and their stories out there, and maybe they get picked up. Maybe I mean it's expensive to put books out. I've put my own book out, which is just a sketchbook. It's just a artist. I do portraits. I'm not really an original artist kind of artist. I do portraits, but AJ who normally hosts with me, he puts out their books, and I know how expensive it is because I've helped him with publishing, and it's hard to get your stuff out there. So if you are a fan of comic books and you find something that just intrigues you, like if someone has a story that you think would be interesting, take a chance. Uh, you never know. I mean, the worst thing that could happen is you don't like it. A lot of times you can get these books for $10, $5, which I mean it's not cheap, but they do, like I said, they have to recover their costs. Uh, and most comic book companies don't make a profit. They're working in the negatives all the time because they're just trying to get their name out there. So if you find independent artists or independent comic book companies that you have any kind of interest in, check them out. I think it's worth it. Like I said, I've discovered some really awesome artists out there, some really awesome books, and some of those people have become friends. So like for instance, like check out Forbidden Panel. You can check them out at forbiddenpanel.com, and you can get their books. I believe AJ said they're $1 digitally. I mean, check out the Zombie Kill Squad. It's something that AJ writes, and a friend of ours, Justin, does the artwork on. There's The Plague put out by a guy named Daniel Whitfield. He's an amazing artist. It's an awesome zombie story. They have some good stuff. And I recommend for anybody to, if you're a comic book fan, to check it out. Especially if you're into that horror genre. But like I said, there's independent comic book companies everywhere. It's not too hard to find them. And granted, a lot of times you find them at conventions and stuff like that. You always see them with the vendors. But there's also nowadays you can find them on TikTok, Kickstarters. A lot of them have Facebooks and stuff. So Instagrams, everything, like everything's on social media now. There's really no other way to advertise. So, but in closing, I just, to this day, I still try to read certain things. I'll check out a Punisher comic book now and then. I'm not really a big fan with the current direction or the last direction, which was probably about 3 years ago, that I was reading with the Punisher. So I kind of just I'll read a synopsis of what's going on with the Punishers and wait. I'll pick up a Thor graphic novel every now and then. Other than that, I'll give anything a shot. So, like I said, if you are a fan of comics, I would definitely advise to just read, just enjoy. Like do read what you like. Old stuff, new stuff. Try to discover. You never know. I'm willing to get anything a shot. If there's any creators out there that would like to reach out, I'd love to get somebody on the podcast and talk to them about their journey in comic books, whether it be writing, drawing, or whatever. Anybody wants me to check out their titles, I'd be more than happy to. Other than that, that's pretty much this show for this week. Once again, sorry for the delay, but I have been dealing with some health issues. We will be at the SoCal Joe Show in Temecula on Sunday. I believe the door opens for the early birds at 9 a.m. We'll be there from 9 to, I believe it runs until 4 or 5. So we'll be there selling toys and, chatting it up with people. Maybe I'll pull out some interviews or something. I'll take my mobile recording devices and see what I can come up with. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoy. Check us out once again, KS Collectibles, KS Collectibles with a K.com. You can check out our inventory there. We're going to be on eBay pretty soon too. And thank everybody for their support. Thanks for listening. Be sure follow us, like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. Help keep the word out. We're going to try to keep this ball rolling, So I'd like to thank everybody once again. All of our links are in all the bios. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. That's. I think that's all of them. Whatever, Twitter, X, whatever it's called, all that stuff. So thank you guys. Stay classy.